I am joined tonight by Dr. Mimi Syed, a board-certified emergency medicine physician from the US. She has made multiple trips to Gaza and has saved multiple lives. Dr. Syed, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Dr. Syed, we've been hearing some troubling news from the State of Israel, from the White House, indicating that a ceasefire or that the ceasefire might come to an end very soon. You've been in Gaza, you've seen the horrors that the destruction has wrought upon the lives of Palestinians. Why is it important that the ceasefire holds, in your opinion?
Yeah, I was in Gaza twice. I was there in August last year all month, and then I was there again in December all month, and I recently returned, obviously, earlier in January. But I mean, ongoing 16 months of that, and then going back to similar conditions after a very brief, somewhat peaceful period would be probably about the cruelest thing you could do to people. I see people and talk to them every day from Gaza, and they are so hopeful and so glad that there aren't mass bombings like there were. That does not mean that there aren't killings. I mean, there are absolutely, the Israeli military continues to shoot and kill people. I think about 166 people have been killed, civilians have been killed since the ceasefire, started. But um, there is so much repair, there's so much recovery that needs to be done that I can't imagine going back to the same conditions again. I just don't think that. I just don't think it's going to be possible to sustain. It has to stop. I just hope for I mean, basically, sake of humanity that this stops. I can't imagine going back to those conditions. There all of the things since ceasefire, the fuel that was promised, the heavy machinery to clear the rubble, the repair of the electricity grid, water purification, the medications, the medical supplies, all of those things that were promised actually have not entered. A fraction of those things have entered, if any. I'm speaking to healthcare workers still on the ground in the hospital. The stock rooms in the hospitals are bare. The medications that were promised that used to actually exist before that they're not even allowed now. So, it kind of seems like a little bit of gaslighting that, oh, yeah, there's a ceasefire, but really they haven't even begun to allow the aid that's needed. So now to top that off with a continuation of bombardment and indiscriminate killing, yeah, I can't imagine it. I don't want to even think about it.
You've mentioned that not much aid has gone in, and even especially when the genocide was going on, the medical system had completely collapsed. Could you give us a bit more information about how the medical system is faring, and if they're able to attend to the patients that require the medical aid so urgently?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know where to begin with that. Just today I was looking at some pictures from Doctors Without Borders, and all of the equipment has been in Kamalad One hospital, Indonesian hospital, everything has been completely and deliberately destroyed. So there was a picture of like an ultrasound machine with the screen completely broken. That's not just the only example. I mean, there's everything destroyed, right? So this has been a deliberate targeting of the hospital system. So to repair that, especially in the north where there are basically no functioning hospitals, it's going to take years, and additionally, I've been speaking to some of the doctors at Nasser Hospital, and the medications that are needed. There's a little girl there that needs a specific type of medication. Without it, she's going to die, and that medication has just been blocked by the Israeli military. So, and then, if you want to talk about medical evacuation, only a small fraction is being allowed out. And that's not to even, that doesn't even go into the cruelty behind it. And I'm sure, your viewers have seen this, but there are families being separated. It's very cruel to ask a mother to separate from her child so that she can accompany her other child for medical treatment and leave all of her other small children behind, or not allowing a father to accompany their children or his children. So What does a small child pose as as a security threat? I don't understand that. The only reason I can see behind that is cruelty, and not allowing the number of evacuations that were once promised. That's just not happening. If you don't build the water system that's been destroyed, the electricity grids that have been destroyed, the roads that have been completely destroyed and opened up by the bulldozers that Israeli military had, you can't really have a hospital. You can bring aid workers in and you can bring all sorts of things in, but you still need to repair the hospital. And that equipment hasn't been allowed in. It's still being, shelters, tents, all of that is being blocked still.
I'd like to go a bit back and talk about your personal experience, maybe. You said you've been to Gaza twice. What influenced you, or what convinced you to even stop working in the US where it's safe and move temporarily to a war zone where you put your life at risk?
I mean, I think first of all, as a human being, but secondly, most importantly for me, is that I'm a mother. I'm a mother of three small children. And I was like other people, just kind of live stream watching these atrocities happening to small children, these helpless children, and the world ignoring it. And I have the skills that were needed at the time. An emergency physician. I have trauma experience. And when I went in August, I mean, I could never have prepared for what I saw. I don't think anybody prepares for that. It doesn't matter what kind of training you have. You don't prepare for dozens of dead children arriving in your emergency department on a daily basis, multiple times a day. There's just no training that prepares you for that. That's not natural. You can have one small mass casualty of children in a school bus that, rolls over and they come into your emergency department. But that's kind of like a one-time deal. Hopefully never happens again. But in Gaza, that happens multiple times a day, every single day. It happened for 4 weeks. And for the people in Gaza, for the healthcare workers, that was happening for, straight a whole year at the time. So, that what I witnessed was something that I don't think anyone could ever imagine seeing, no matter how trained or how, what kind of training they have, what kind of background they have.
Is there anything in particular that you saw during your time in Gaza which made you think this is more cruel than anything you could imagine? This is different to anything you've seen before.
Yeah, I mean, I think that all of us, yeah, I don't want to speak for my colleagues, but I think we've all talked. And when you get there, when you enter Gaza, you know that there is something wrong, right? This is not a normal war zone. Everything is destroyed. Every single building is damaged. It's basically rubble. Everything is rubble. You look around. I think one of my colleagues had mentioned that he was in Khan Yunis and he could see the sea, which means that there's no buildings between him and the sea, and everything is destroyed. And when you get there, you see children walking around unattended, no adult to be found anywhere. Small children. I'm not talking about adolescents or anything. I'm talking about like a 2-year old, a 1.5-year old, walking around with like a 5-year old. That's just not normal. And this is not a population that was like this before. This happened to them instantly overnight. And something, you asked me, is there something that I noticed was odd? Yeah, absolutely. Um, Children showing up daily, multiple times a day with bullets in their head, in their chest, in their abdomen. It's a little odd. Um, I didn't see it happen, but I can certainly tell you with logic, that's a sniper or that's a drone sniper. That's being done deliberately. I can't imagine that only children are being shot in the head on accident or in crossfire. That just logically doesn't make any sense. And it's not just me, all of my colleagues witnessed this. So, that's yeah, that's odd. That's not something you should expect anywhere. Shooting children on purpose, deliberately targeting small children, and not children that are like could be teenagers or you can mistake them for adults. Small children under the age of 12 deliberately being targeted, that's not normal. That is not natural. That is not that you don't see that in war zones, and say that, oh, that's crossfire. That's deliberate. Additionally, that we all know population of Gaza is about 50% children. So if you know that about a population, why is it okay? And how can you justify dropping 2,000-pound bombs on tents where you know families reside with small children there? So even if you want to use the illogical argument that, oh, that's crossfire, we're not targeting children, how could you drop bombs like that on children when you know that population is 50% children? So, and you can tell, you hear a drone there all the time, 24/7. You have a drone buzzing in your ear, doing surveillance, hearing shots fired, shortly after. So all of this is, it gives you this kind of eerie sense that there's just something off. This is not a normal war zone. Something else is going on here.
In terms of the children that have been shot deliberately in the head, the New York Times did cover this story. However, in the mainstream media and in the mainstream consciousness, it doesn't seem to have gained that much traction, at least nowhere near the amount of traction that the lies that have been spread about October the 7th gained. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that the deliberate killing of children is not of the mainstream media's concern?
Yeah, I mean, I think when the article came out, Dr. Sidwell wrote that article. He polled like about 65 physicians, I think, in the US. And, most of us had seen children with gunshots in their head or their chest. That picture that you're referring to, that skull with the bullet, that was a picture that I submitted, along with the other two that I submitted with children with bullets in their heads or their necks. And that little girl is 4 years old. Her name is Mira. She actually is alive. I was able to save her, and she was able to get the surgery she needed. But when that article came out and that those pictures were published, I think it was very powerful to see a small child, with a bullet in the skull. I think most people would find that very disturbing. And I received a lot of backlash. I had people telling me that I fabricated it, I should have my license removed, I should watch my back, and that a lot of empty threats that you kind of see on the ugly Twitter or X or whatever. But I think that there's a sense of cognitive dissonance that people have. Um, they know that there's something atrocious happening, but burying your head in the sand is a lot easier. Um, when we were in DC a couple of weeks ago, I showed that picture to people in Congress and in staff for the Senate, and people were disturbed by that picture. I don't think there's a question about whether this is disturbing or not. I think we all agree, hopefully, if you are a normal person, you agree that shooting children in the head is not normal and it's not okay. It's not justified. But I think that there's a lot of it doesn't affect me directly, that type of business happening. And, let's keep that as far away from us as we can. But there's also a complicity, right? There's also, if you acknowledge that this is happening on purpose, it kind of makes you complicit. The US directly arms the Israeli military. And to say that this is happening with our money makes us guilty. So I think that there's a sense of distancing ourselves. And of course, there's a stigma attached to anything that supports the Palestinian people and Gaza or anything. Even if you say shooting children deliberately in Gaza is not okay, somehow that becomes a stigma to say something like that, which is absurd.
A lot of people will be watching, and they are seeing the Trump comments threatening war, going back to what is essentially genocide. And a lot of people will be asking, what can they do in order to pressure those in power to avoid that? You mentioned that that the Zionist army is supported by the US monetarily, and you are a US citizen. What do you think can be done from by those who by the masses in order to kind of avoid that?
Yeah, I mean, it seems a little deflating, right? This has been going on for so long, and there have been protests, and there have been boycotts, and there have been all of these things, and it seems like we barely move the needle. But honestly, I think that, a collective voice is very important, and I think that the narrative is changing. There has been a lot of exposure to what, the evil doings in Gaza and to the people of Palestine. That's been exposed because after October 7th. And, however it happened, the truth is that more people know about Gaza now than they ever did in the past. And more people are aware of the apartheid system there. So I think that continuing to pay attention and continuing to voice, change this narrative. I think the narrative is very important. This rhetoric that, oh well, we're defending ourselves, or that this has to happen to defend ourselves. This is obviously, that's absurd, right? There are no civilians that are being safe there. I mean, they're not deliberately trying to spare civilians. That's just simply not true. I've heard that rhetoric in the news quite often, that we are the most moral army and we are trying to spare as many civilians as we can. Well, that's just simply not true. It's absolutely not true. And the Western media saying that is complicit. I mean, it actually contributes to this. So that needs to stop. And people need to be aware that I mean, it's just BS. It's just not true, because the numbers don't add up, right? If you're deliberately trying to spare civilians, then how come is it that every single physician that went there, every doctor that went there, saw over 70% women and children and 100% civilians? We lived in the hospital for 4 weeks at a time. I lived there 4 weeks at a time for 2 times in 2 different parts of the year in 2 different hospitals. Never did I see any militants, combatants, weapons. You would have thought that, oh, some member of Hamas would have been injured and brought in. Never, it just never happened. I was in that hospital day and night, 24/7. We worked all hours of the day. We worked at night, we worked in the morning. We spoke to everybody there, all of the locals. You would have heard something. We had access to every part of the hospital. So it never happened. And to say that there are, members of Hamas inside of the hospital and that's why we bombed it, it's a lie. I That's all I can say. It's just not true, because they weren't there. And you could say, oh well, it's a coincidence they weren't there in August or in December when I was there. Why did Kamal Adwan get completely under siege, and the healthcare workers detained illegally without any reason? Why was Alexa bombed a few weeks before I got there? There was nobody there. That rhetoric is just not true. And I think that people need to wake up and understand that that's just being used as an excuse. And keep voicing that, because the narrative has to change. It has to change in mass. It has to change collectively. And this whole ceasefire disguise that, oh, it's ceasefire, therefore we can look away and stop paying attention. Absolutely not. That is the most important time to actually pay attention and continue to be aware of what's happening, despite this whole ceasefire. Because children are still being shot by snipers after that, right? We continue to see that. And I wanted to mention West Bank. Gaza is important, but West Bank we have to pay attention to, because really the same pattern is happening in West Bank that started in Gaza after October 7th. Hospitals are being bombed, children are being shot every day there with snipers, and a pregnant woman was shot by a sniper. I mean, so this is what started. This is what was happening in Gaza. This is also happening in West Bank. But unfortunately, people aren't paying attention. But it's still happening.
What does it say about the Israeli intent conducting this war? There is a so-called ceasefire, as you call it, yet they've killed people in Gaza and they continue to kill in the West Bank. In fact, there is a siege on some of the cities and refugee camps in the West Bank as we speak. What do you think the Zionists are trying to achieve here?
I mean, the Israeli military, has said, okay, well, we're not targeting civilians, we're not targeting children, yet we continue to see it happen. So, we're just looking at facts and numbers. It's just not true. So, and anyone can argue, well, it could have been one sniper, or it could have been, one specific day that was unlucky. Yeah, but this has been happening for 16 months, and it's been happening every day. Every foreign physician has witnessed it. So it's not true that it's not deliberate. It is absolutely deliberate. And I think it's an excuse to say, oh, well, we were abiding by the ceasefire, and we're going to use this excuse to bomb you again. Well, it's not true. They've been provoking and continuing to target civilians despite the ceasefire agreement. This has happened. It happened right after, in fact, but like the next day, they were targeting people in Rafah, and a sniper that was on video, is like live streamed. A small child was shot. So it's this, cruel intentions, these cruel acts to continue to push and push. And then when something happens, you play victim. When someone else retaliates, that side retaliates to defend themselves, you act like a victim. And that's this entire premise of what's been going on for the past 16 months. And I think it's pretty obvious. I don't think it's a secret. I don't think that people are, buying it. You have to deliberately look away and deliberately deny it. And, that's the only conclusion I can make.
A couple comments from our viewers. Ed calls you Superwoman, and Christina says she has a lot of respect for what you've done. And speaking of, your actions, the time that you spent in Gaza, it could not have been easy. And you mentioned that a lot of hospitals were bombed. Did you at any time feel like that would become your reality in the hospital you were working in? What was it like for you in Gaza in your time there?
Oh, 100%. I think, none of us are safe there. There's nobody that can be spared. Nobody's immune to any of it. Historically, healthcare workers are protected in conflict zones. But in Gaza, it's the opposite. And I think we all know that, healthcare workers are targeted specifically on purpose. There was a bullet hole in every single ambulance there that we saw. And when you ask the workers, what happened, they're like, oh yeah, we got shot by a sniper or a drone. There were many times there where they were shooting right by the hospital. There in August, I remember I was on the roof one time making a phone call, and I started hearing shots after a drone was there. I could hear the drone, and suddenly I hear shots fired. Well, that we heard all the time. I didn't realize it was being directed towards the hospital. And so one of the trauma surgeons came and grabbed me and said, "You're being shot at. You need to get down." And when I was there in August as well, there was a car parked out on the hospital grounds, and it was bombed. It was so loud. We were already in the ED doing a mass casualty incident, and the bomb was so loud that my ears were ringing. The doors were shuttering, and moving. The walls were moving. The ground beneath me was moving, and so that tells you how close it was. So it's never really that, the hospital is safe, or the healthcare workers are safe. That's really not the case. We all have this false sense of security, but we have to have something to be able to make that reality. Otherwise, no one will.
On a final note, what do you think is in the cards for you in the future? What work are you looking to do to continue your advocacy for the end of this destruction in Gaza and in Palestine?
Yeah, I mean, my advocacy won't stop until Gaza is safe, the people are safe. But hopefully, I get to return and help with rebuilding and helping the people there. But we continue to do advocacy work. Like I said a couple of weeks ago, we were in DC, doing some work with Congress and staff members of Senate, and then we do spoke with Secretary General Guterres and other UN members, and that was very reassuring. So I will continue. I will not stop until my last breath. I just can't. As a mother, I can't. I can't um, sleep at night knowing that there are mothers in Gaza that don't get the same security, same safety for their children that I do for my children. And frankly, it's just not fair. Just because I'm in a different part of the world, I was born in a different part of the world, that I have that safety for my children and the mothers of Gaza don't. That's simply not okay. And I refuse to raise children in a world that happens.
Dr. Mimi Syed, board certified emergency medicine physician from the US. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you.